I was about to do the intro and I read the chat, Jordan. That was good. That was good. I should have thought of that. But welcome back, everybody, to the stream. Great to be back. Obviously, we missed last week. I do apologize, but I did have an emergency that came up, and of course, when life happens, you gotta handle business, right? So that is all good. And yeah, we have something that inadvertently has been in the making for a long time. A long time. Funny story. Uh, I started the Learning Curve series last year, around October, maybe November, and basically, uh, I did a couple episodes and the holidays happened, right? And when the holidays happen, there's other stuff you got to do. Things get pushed to the side, and they keep get pushed to the side or whatever. And I'm gonna be real. I I get this at. Yeah, everything's good, Matt. I appreciate it. All is good. It just had to, something came up, and it's getting but I got added on Twitter, and I read it, and it was basically somebody asking, when's the next episode coming out of Learning Curves? And I looked at that mess and I was like, oh shit. Chat, I completely forgot about the series. So, whoever did that on Twitter, you saved the series because it would have never been done ever again. It just would have not happened. But because it's been so long since the last episode, I wanted to bring even more to this episode. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do what is basically like a normal, kind of shorter um, learning curves episode. But then what we're also going to do is at the end, I've created a tool. And I think th- I think the math behind the tool is good enough to power creep the hypergeometric calculator. For those of you who don't know, the hypergeometric calculator is basically used to identify the percentage point at which an occurrence is predicted to happen, right? So if you have X amount of blues in your deck and you draw 4 cards in a 60 card deck, you have X% chance to draw a blue, right? That is the type of question you would ask a hypergeometric calculator. But I thought to myself, I said, that's not good enough. Nobody's ever been able to explain to me, is 92% acceptable? Is 83% acceptable? It's a number. There's nothing. It requires so much knowledge to convert the number that a hypergeometric calculator would give you to actually receive value from having that number. And so I thought to myself, I said, what if you had a calculator that literally told you how many blues to run? And so I built it. Um, and it is in the early stages, but it's actually really like I thought it was going to be here at this point in time, but it's actually here. Um, I've only put like a few hours into it, but it is like astronomically better than I thought. I got really lucky with the weights early on, and it kind of works. It kind of works, and I'm going to break down the entire tool. I'm going to tell you how to get it. It's basically on a Google sheet, and I'm going to provide that to you after the stream. I'm going to put it in the Discord, and yeah, we're also going to talk about some other stuff before we get into that. But I'm telling you, also, I know a lot of people are used to the visual aid during the learning curve series. Unfortunately, because the tool absorbed a lot of time that I had to create the episode, there will be no there will be no visual aid or PowerPoint or what you will for the episode. So if you're an audio listener, all up until the tool, you get the full experience, except for this beautiful face, which means you get the full experience. And basically, so feel free to listen to this on just basically driving in the car or whatever. And but I highly, highly recommend when we get to that tool part to watch, because I'm telling you, it's good. I'm telling you, it's fucking good. It's really good. And I just started, so it's only going to get better. Is the most important aspect of it. So I'm really excited to share that with all of you. I've made a lot of progress on it, and we'll see. We'll see what you guys think, and maybe some feedback on some things should be added, taken away, things like that. Let me get caught up in chat. Bro, your laugh scared the fuck out of me. I wasn't expecting to come in laughing, but I literally hit the switch scene button the same time that I read it, and it just killed me. It literally just killed me. It was pretty good. It was pretty good. So, RTNCs is over. You know what I'm here to ask. Yeah, I know. And that's one thing that I'm gonna spend a couple minutes explaining to you guys how right I was in my predictions, because that's what we do. And I got receipts to back it up. Just saying. And we're gonna walk through the evolution of the RTN season real quick. Feel free to listen on your iPod Shuffle. Hey, those iPod Nanos, they used to be the shit back in the day. I'm telling you. Well, that's a little tip of the hat to how old I am. But what's up, Andy? Good to see you. Let's go ahead and get started, since we got a lot of shit we got to cover today. So let's go ahead and hop into the RTN shenanigans. Okay, so when RTN 1 happened, basically my prediction was that Mario would fall off, but I also gave the context that within 2 weeks, once again, I have receipts. I said within 2 weeks, Syndra would fall. Okay? And then I said approximately 30 days after that, Prism would fall. And then Enigma would gain a little bit of an edge. And I said later in the season, Zen was going to make a comeback. Is literally what I said. I have receipts. And we saw a drop in Mario. Not too much. A little bit of a drop. And this is basically where I said that. And then week 3 came around and we saw the drop from Syndra, fully predicted. But none of the rest of it came to fruition, right? Because Zen's still down there. We expect the Prism realization to be delayed. That's expected. I kind of built that into the prediction, but come week 4, boom, Zen automatically just goes to second. Now Enigma has not jumped up. I think that is a very similar situation to Prism. And what my actual end prediction for So what my end goal for the prediction is swapping Enigma and Prism. Basically, they're exact same spots, just swap them. And that's because I think Prism's going to be put in a hard spot to where decks are going to be a lot more, willing to block her and, make those changes accordingly. So I think that Prism will do pretty good for the next 2 weeks or so, but then come Pro Tour, I think she'll see a drop. Is my prediction. It'll be a little bit delayed because you'll have some deniers, which that is illusionist players. Hey, I would love to collab with you guys. Well, I mean, I'm always open to making fab content. So hit me up with a DM and what you have in mind. So yeah, that's kind of, I don't know why we zoomed all the way in on that, but that was interesting. So that left us with a final result of course, Viscera dominating. Now, the interesting story as well of week 4 is not only the resurgence of Zen, but also Aurora. Aurora kind of like filled the void that was associated with Viserai. So she didn't really move up. I think she just ate a little bit of his share, right? You have a lot of Rune Blade players that probably just defaulted to playing Aurora as kind of like the next most familiar thing. And basically, that's what resulted in that. And also, you had the release of the Armory deck, which does have some pretty good cards, let's be honest. And that basically resulted in her being the top deck for the week. We will be doing a tier list here in about a week or two. I need a little bit more time to kind of solidify my information, do some digging, some theory crafting on how stuff's going to move and things like that. I need a little bit more time to kind of really hone in and give you an accurate prediction before the actual Pro Tour. But so far, we're pretty good, right? We kind of missed at the very, very beginning on Syndra's performance, although I did say that was the one that I didn't know about because I just couldn't understand what the deck was ultimately trying to do. And then I realized the Mask of Momentum interaction with Flick Knives. I was like, okay, this is the real deal. And then very quickly adjusted and then predicted the drop. And then, yes, she's making a little bit of a comeback, but not really. If you go from week 3 to week 4, she had 10 wins here and then went down to 8. So this image gives the appearance that she's making the resurgence. No, she's actually continuing to decline, just like I said she would. I said that she was going to drop off like a bad habit, and that's exactly what happened. In fact, I even called the week. I said during week 2, I said 2 weeks from now, week 4 at the latest, it would happen, and that's exactly what it dropped off. And so there you go. People are understanding how to play against the deck. They're also, putting in it's a deck that's very easy to hate on. Am I saying it's a bad deck? Of course not. It's a good deck, but it's very easy to hate on it is the problem. And I think people are going to leverage that. And then also we had a ban and suspended announcement. Now, it didn't change. Nothing changed, and I completely agree with this. In fact, I saw James White on Twitter ask somebody what they thought the changes were, and I saw that reply, and I was like, what do I think the changes are? And I sat there for like 10 minutes, and I was like, I can't think of anything. I was like, you could unban Skeletor, but like, if you really just wanted to inject Florian into the game, like that is something that you could feasibly do, because I guess that makes Vinny's kind of restricted on how she can leverage that, right? Because it doesn't interact with RuneGate really, so she gets better with it, but it's not not gonna break the game. And then Aurora, it's very difficult for Aurora to use it, period. It probably is an upgrade. You probably make some changes to kind of make a rune chant here or there, but like, it's not going to break you don't go all in on a Sonata package in Aurora. It's just not going to happen. So I was like, that and CYB were like the only two things that I really saw that were possibilities. And, it is what it is. So, and they seem to have landed on something similar, and that is good to know. Illusionist players are delusional. That's Bonds of Agony ban win. That's actually interesting. It really depends on how, but apparently the assassins are, other than new for obvious reasons, because she's MST, is not doing too well. So I don't think it's needed. I do agree that it's a card that, I don't know. It leads to some really fun moments in Flesh and Blood, and it leads to some really not fun moments in Flesh and Blood. So I understand where the thought process comes from, but at the same time, maybe. Okay. And then I know nothing about commoners, so I'm gonna keep it real with you. Hopefully that's good. I wish you the best if that's your format, because I just don't know. I know the best thing that you can do in Commoner is rock Cold Full Iron Rod. That's all I know. And Living Legend, obviously, Somersault had to get restricted. I think that's a very good tailored ban. In fact, I think that Starvo could even afford another hit, maybe Felling, something like that. I think I saw Mara make that suggestion, and I kind of agree with it. Although this could be enough. I think with Chain coming in with Cull, you can go like Runegate Chain, and I think that's so yeah, I think this might actually be. I think it might be the perfect ban, because I don't think that Starvo is going to be the best deck in Living Legend. I think it's going to be Runegate Chain. That is my prediction for this format with this ban. But we will see. We will see. Okay, let us go ahead and start. Let me get caught up in chat real quick. Aren't those the same moments? If you're referring to Bond's Vagabonding, yeah, you're kind of right. You're kind of right. Yeah. Aurora is the consistent aggro that has a fridge as equipment. Somersault is overpowered. It's very interesting you said that, because I made a new Aurora deck, and it's very unique, and I think I'm gonna go over it next week. I haven't decided, but I think I might. It's very unique. It's very unique. I might go over it next week. We'll see. Tune in to next stream, and if you see Aurora, I'm telling you, you don't want to miss it, because it's something different. It's something different. I think that a change in her would be nice. Ravenous Simulator is boring. Come next week. Come next week. I got something for you. Still absolutely near the top of the meta, though. Oh, 100%. He's not dead by any means. I mean, just like I said, he could actually afford maybe even a little bit of a ban on top of that. But at the same time, I think it might be enough, to be honest. Creepers Aurora, you're thinking way too conservative. I'm talking like 30 cards different than a normal Aurora list. You're way too conservative. I'm talking about this is different. This is built different. Okay. All right. Anyway, more on that next week. Sorry to leave you hanging in anticipation, but it is what it is. We gotta get through the episode. I gotta hurry, because that tool is killer at the end. I'm telling you, I'm so excited. I want to do it now, but it's like part of the we're just gonna do the episode real quick. We're gonna fly through it, and then we're gonna get straight to the tool that I promise you don't want to miss. If you want to know exactly how many blues you need, I've built the tool for you. I'm telling you, it's so good. It's so good. It's so fucking good. I'm telling you. So much math, but it was worth it. It was worth it. Okay. Let's get started on the episode. And we will go. Let's see. We got to cover that. Let me get my notes pulled up so I don't miss anything. I don't want to miss anything. Okay. Let me do that. Okay. Let's do it. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to episode 3 of Learning Curve, where we're going to be talking about deck building. And then also at the end, we got a special little segment about a deck building tool, to where it tells you exactly how many blues you want to run, instead of just guessing on a hypergeometric calculator on 87% versus 92. It'll just tell you exactly how many you need to slot into that deck. Okay, so first things first, we're talking about building a deck, okay? And oh my God, I'm already getting hate in chat. When did Learning Curve 2 come out? Look, it's been months, Noah. It's been months, but that's not the point. We're here. We're doing it, okay? All right. So first thing we're going to talk about is the first step in deck building. And like I said, we are not going to be using PowerPoints this time. We are going to just be running through deck lists as like an example kind of situation. Um, and so the first thing you have to do in deck building process is identify your thing. I've heard Michael Hamilton say, and I believe in an episode of his podcast where he said you need to select the powerful thing that you're trying to do. And I 100% agree with that notion. And what is the perfect example? I think the best deck that we could actually look at in running through the process of how to build a deck, I think the best example that we could utilize is, in my opinion, probably the greatest deck from a deck building not the strongest deck, but the best deck build I've ever seen. And the answer to that question is going to be the Michael Hamilton Bullander list. I think is the perfect example of like the perfect deck build, you know? And I think that's a great thing to kind of study and kind of come up with, what pieces can we extract that we can carry over to other decks that we attempt to build. And so, like I mentioned earlier, you have to identify the powerful thing. What is the deck trying to do that makes it powerful? Okay, let's give a couple examples. Obviously, with Icelander, you're just basically taking the aggro game plan, right? Of I'm trying to do lots of value per turn, but instead of dividing it all offensively, you're just trying to split it kind of half and half. Do a little bit of offense, a little bit of defense, which increases the consistency, and then you add disruption for the decks that their hands scale much better than yours. And then you also have little combo pieces built in, right? And I don't, forgive me, this is obviously not the Hamilton Bullander, but it's a Bullander list, and I think they're all close enough. So I know somebody's going to call me on that one, but this is just one of the ones that was at the World Championship. Probably, if I had to guess, it's probably Yuki's, if I had to guess. But so you have to identify your powerful thing. If you're an aggro deck, that example would be you're trying to produce the most rate on offense. Like that, it's as simple as that sentence, right? Whereas this one, it's what I just explained. Another good example would be dual wielding warrior, right? You're trying to extend the game out as long as possible to get as much block off of dynamos as you possibly can in efforts to come out ahead on turn over turn value, right? That is the powerful thing that you're trying to achieve, right? So once you identify that, your thing, right? And this is where the deck comes from, right? Anytime you think of a deck idea, this is the thing that makes the wheels start spinning, okay? Now, let's get into the second thing that we have to identify. The second thing that we have to identify is define the resource curve, okay? We have to define the resource curve. Now, that can be step 2, or it could also be anywhere between kind of step 3 and 4, and I'm going to explain why. Because maybe you need to build what we're going to get into later, your shell, and then identify your curve off of the shell. That is a possibility depending on the deck that you're building. But for like probably 70% of decks, most decks in Flesh and Blood operate on a 1 blue cost curve. Most of them do. Where you just want to be able to have 1 blue per turn, and then some decks take it a step further where you want 1 blue on both sides, like Icelander, right? Typically, you want to draw 2 blue cards a turn and so forth, okay? And yeah, so you need to identify your resource curve. Another good example of this is old school Viscerai, where we did like Mauve, Shrill, Rosetta, right? It's a 2 cost into the 1 resource swing, right? For perfect efficiency. So in your deck building process, when you start developing your shell, what you want to do is not look at 3 cost, right? It does not make sense to start looking at 3 cost cards. or even one cost cards because you're leaving a lot on the table depending. Some might be worth it, but overall, that's just a general point to take. Um, and then once you identify your resource curve that you're going to approach, do I need one blue? Do I need multiple blues? Like, what is the average cost? Am I running a bunch of 0 cost or 6 cost like Bravo? Identify your cost curve. Then the third thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to ask yourself what style of deck is it going to fit in? And what do I mean by that? I mean aggro, mid-range, and control, right? Or in obviously it could be combo as well. There's a lot of different archetypes that a deck could fall into. And you're going to try and identify which one based off of the powerful thing. I'll re-mention the idea of the dynamos and the dual-wielding warrior, right? If you have a dual-wielding warrior and your powerful thing is blocking with dynamos as much as you possibly can to extract as much value from that piece of equipment as possible, does it make sense to add a bunch of 2 blocks to your hand? Well, the answer is no, because the more you add 2 blocks, effectively in the game of Flesh and Blood, you are speeding the game up because you have 2 choices when you draw that 2 block. You either block with it and get very little value, or you have to play it offensively, right? If you play it offensively, you're taking damage to do so, which shrinks the length of the game, okay? So anytime you add cards that don't block as well, you are shortening the average length of game for your deck, okay? With that being said, we want to identify the strategy that we want to adopt, which is going to influence our block values in our decision making, right? And just like I mentioned in the example, the next thing that we want to do is finally build our shell. And once again, we're going to kind of keep going with the Icelander and kind of dual wielding warriors as examples, right? Because they're pretty straightforward and easy to understand. So once you build your shell, right? First of all, what is the shell, right? Well, the shell is the minimum amount of cards that you need to do the powerful thing. I'll explain. For dual wielding warrior, right? It would actually probably be a good idea if I'm going to talk about this deck so many times to bring it up and actually display it. So let's go find us a dual wielding warrior deck. I've probably got one sitting around here somewhere. Let's try to find one real quick. Where you at? Here's a Kasai list, right? With dynamos. Okay. So the shell of the deck. What cards do you need for this bad boy to remove its counter? That's the question. Does this card help you remove a counter off dynamos? No. It's not in the shell. Does this card help you do that? No. This card is not in the shell of the deck. This card is the shell of the deck. So you run 9 of these bitches, right? And then you have spoils. So basically any card that actively gives one of your swords go again is the shell. And then you need a resource base to pay for said shell, right? So run through that's your combo conditions. So that'd probably be part of the shell as well. Your spoils, your hit and runs, things like that. That is your shell. Then after you have the shell, once again, definition of that is the least amount of cards you need. Now, let me preface that. The least amount of cards you need to do the powerful thing. That can look very different for several decks. Like this, in the shell of Kasai is probably on less than 30 cards, right? You probably have like 15 go again. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, also with a little bit of go again built in. You have 12, 15, 18. I'll count the blue hit and run here. 18, then you add a couple more blues like Glint. The shell of this deck, of the powerful thing of this deck, is literally like 24 cards. Literally. That's like the shell of it. Okay. From there, you want to say, what problems can I solve with the remaining cards that go in the normal 60, right? Some people take a different approach on some people like to be at like 40 cards and they have a huge sideboard and they bring in for simplicity reasons. We're going to assume that you have a 60 card main deck and then the rest is sideboarding, okay? So, with that being said, least amount of cards possible to create the shell to do the powerful thing. I know this would be a warrior video perfect. I mean, it just has to be, right? And then we'll explain with Icelander. For Icelander, you literally run your ice package and your 2 for 8s. That is your shell, right? And then you start solving problems from there. So you basically have your defensive options, your D reacts, your 2 for 8s, and your good ice blues. And then the rest is supplementary, right? Okay. So next thing that we're going to do is ask ourselves what major problems can we solve with the rest of the cards. So using this deck as an example, with the other 36 cards, the not 24 part of the shell, what are some major problems we can solve, right? Well, if all we're doing is swinging sword and swinging again, right? Another part of our strategy is we're trying to generate copper, right? That's another, or gold, is another thing that we are actively trying to do. So somebody's going to try to block us, right? And we want a way to punish that. So that's where we land on. I know this is very obvious, but I'm just explaining the thought process so people can apply it to different situations. We put in attack reactions, right? To counter that weakness that was identified. Okay, so we add Blade Fury, we add In the Swing, we add, but we also need a win con against any deck that tries to fatigue us. Let's add Raise an Army, right? We're solving problems at the lowest amount of opportunity cost possible, right? We're not paying with these specific card choices, we are not paying high opportunity cost on these cards, okay? Good example is like Diplomacy and Hold the Line, right? You're just swapping a blue. It's not that big of a deal. You're not paying a huge cost. You're just changing a little bit of your blue base. So that's okay to build that into the main structure of the deck. I built a marking dude that's actually been winning at my armories. I mean, that sounds interesting. That sounds interesting. I still haven't figured out Celia. Well, watch this and you might be able to. Probably not. Stelio's a doozy. And once again, some of these are easier some decks are easier and some decks are definitely more difficult for sure. And then obviously, one thing that I forgot to mention, I hate that I did because I'm focused so much on dynamos, but a part of your shell should be your equipment. I think that's pretty obvious. But I take that back. It's actually some pieces of equipment, right? So an example of that would be like balance is not pivotal to the shell. You could have any headpiece possible, which is why I probably Crown Dominion's in there as well, is because that piece is kind of expendable. It's not a pivotal part of the shell. Whereas grains and dynamo very much are. And then this is just simply the best option for the arm slot. So that's what you run. And so not all of your equipment pieces will be part of your shell. That some of those might be added just because they're the best option, right? But that is a pivotal piece of the shell. Obviously, is the equipment. I apologize for skipping that. So, okay. The next thing that you want to do after you try to solve major problems, fatigue, people blocking you, people not blocking, those really impactful things with those extra cards outside of the shell. The next thing that you really want to do, because you gain so much advantage from it in the game of Flesh and Blood, is it viable to operate on a switchboard? And what do I mean when I say switchboard? I want you to think of I want you to think of basically the idea of like Dash, OG Dash, right? Where you have an opportunity to have a very defensive package that can go long and then a very aggressive package to go a little bit quicker. Uh, that has so much value in the game of Flesh and Blood. And it's because your opponent basically has to guess right on what you're trying to accomplish. And you might get edges in games that you didn't even know you got because your deck can do that. So it's very important to gain that edge if you have the ability to. With that being said, we're not going to like completely rework the shell just so we can. We want to start with the powerful idea. Then from there, is it feasible? We don't want to get attached to it. We don't want to get married to it. We don't want to sit there and say, no matter what, I'm playing switchboard. I don't care if I have to cut in half this deck. We don't want to take that approach. We want to ask ourselves, can we afford to? Is basically the idea. And then from there, we should have our 60 cards, right? We should have the base 60. We have a shell that could, depending on the deck, could be all 60 cards. I'm kind of looking at mech. Any mech that has to boost. Your shell is predefined by you have to have mech cards. It's that simple. Like that is what you have to do. Now, mech, I'm not saying that mech shell is 60 cards. What I am saying is that mech usually has a much larger shell and they can't side in and out as many cards as they would like to because the card pool is limited because they're limited within their class cards. Whereas, a deck like Briar or something can reach really far out. Infectious Host, some really out there ideas, right? To just answer any particular question. But with that being said, now that we have an idea of what the main deck would look like, we have to move to a sideboard. Okay. Now, I'm going to spend a little bit of time here explaining. I think this is where a lot of people mess up, is not understanding the math behind a sideboard decision. Okay. And I'm going to use Null Rune as an example because I'm going to be 100% honest. I think it's the best example. I always get the question from people. It's the endless question. Should you respect Kano? And I know the Kano players are going to jump up and down when I say that, but mathematically, the correct answer is you should disrespect the shit out of them. That is the correct answer in most cases. And I'll explain the math behind that and give you something more logical that you can latch on to other than just, hey, believe me, right? But the idea is, let's say that there's a 100-person tournament. And we're going to use 100 because the math is just easier that way. Okay. Let's say, now, historically, we have always known that Kasai and Takano is a dog shit matchup for Kasai, period. It just so happens that, don't tell Majin Bey, but this deck actually beat Majin Bey to win this calling. But that we're not going to go there, right? But it is a dog shit matchup for Kasai. And so I'm going to sound a little bit of a hypocrite because the reason that this deck probably won is because it had no run. But I digress. Doesn't mean that it was the mathematically correct choice. Even though the math is low, it could have been the right choice. And I'll explain why. So we have a tournament that we're entering into that will have 100 people. Let's say that we estimate that 3 people will play Kano, which 3% of the field playing Kano is probably pretty on par for what we see, right? Sometimes he's seen spikes up to like 7 or 8, but like 3 is pretty standard, right? And so we have a 100-person tournament expecting 3 Kanos. Therefore, Kano is expecting to be 3% of the field. The way that you mathematically determine whether a sideboard slot is worth it, and this is how you basically should do all your sideboarding, is you take a card Okay, we're going to use the example of no rune gloves and no rune boots as a combination. Well, actually, we're going to say that you have to have one for like rune blades. So, like, the only one that's for Kano is the extra one. So, we're going to say just no rune gloves is for Kano. So, we're only going to analyze that one piece of equipment. Okay. So, you're using one card to increase, and like, let's say that you the hardest part of this equation is you have to identify what the matchup spread difference is with and without it. Okay, I'm just going to use an example that's probably pretty realistic. uh Without this no rune glove, the Kasai and Kano matchup is probably 90-10 in Kano's favor, and with the gloves, it, once again, I believe probably an accurate statement, makes it 80-20. You probably get a 10% edge in that matchup, okay? From that one card. So the way that you work that math in sideboarding for tournaments is you take the edge you gain from that card. In this instance, it is 10% because our win rate goes from, in one matchup, 90-10 to 80-20. That is a 10% gain with the card. And then the expected representation of Kano is 3%, 3 out of 100. Then you multiply those numbers together, and 10% times 3 is 0.3. So by adding no rune gloves, your deck has a 0.3% higher win rate mathematically. Now, that math is very, the accuracy of that number highly depends on how much effort you put in obtaining the difference on having it versus not having it, right? So the answer to that question is, and this is the ultimate sideboarding question, is now that we have identified the numerical value of that card, is there a card out there where we can gain 0.4%? And if the answer is yes, we should not have this card in our deck. But if the answer is no, maybe the deck just doesn't gain a lot from having a lot. We've seen those decks where you just don't gain a lot from the sideboard. It does the thing. The thing's cool. You just add it because there's slots and it makes stuff a little bit better, right? We've seen those decks. But, that's the math. And so now you go on a hunt. Is an extra D-rack to give you maybe a 10% edge into something that's more represented? And then that's the answer. But so it's actually dependent on two things. You have to get the estimated representation correct, and you have to get the difference in the matchup. I'm playing Vincent. I have AB3 by existing. I mean, that is definitely been, and that's another good example is like cards like Remembrance, right? Like, how much is it actually helping in those fatigue matchups? And are you paying too high of an opportunity cost in adding that? Is it better to just run a third piece of no rune or something? You just don't know. And that's the point that I'm ultimately trying to prove. And so that is how you should work through your sideboard, is do the math for every single card. Okay, then the final step, in my opinion, before, unfortunately, in a lot of situations, you basically just go back and do the same things over and over and over again as you refine the deck list. The last thing that you want to do is you want to go through every single card and ask yourself, why is this card in here? And the reason, I know that sounds very obvious, right? You're like, oh, well, no shit. I mean, you should do that every time. But I'm really talking about the people that make automatic decisions. And I'll reference a conversation with teammate Josh Lau that I had one time. We were on a trip to a tournament somewhere, and we were talking about his deck, and I was like, "Okay, what reactions do you have?" Okay, okay. He said, "Red overpower," and I was like, "Josh, why are you running red overpower?" And he goes, "What do you mean? I've always ran red overpower." And I asked him, "But why are you running it?" And he said, "Shit." And he basically realized that he basically just when everybody starts on a hero, it's very easy to ask, why is this card here? Why is this one not here? And go through it. But if you get into a deck or a hero or a class, there are certain habits that are very, very difficult to break. Very difficult. And it's very important to consistently ask yourself, is this the best way to do it? Is glint good enough? Like, I know that sounds crazy, and because usually it is, but it's an honest question. I guarantee you 95% of people that built their first Fang deck, they just threw glint in, right? They're like, glint, throw it in, right? Because it's just, you just assume that it is that good, right? And it's not always the case. So that is that is definitely kind of the idea of, you want to just verify and justify every single card that's in the list, okay? And then after all of that's done, you want to check ratios, okay? It is very, very important to check your ratios. This can come in so many different avenues. It can come into what we're about to get into, my tool that will tell you exactly how many blues you need for your deck. And then also, it will give you the ability to um, look at certain ratios, as like Runeblade, for an example, right? Attacks, non-attacks, things like that, that are very important, because you cannot mess those things up, because if you do, it just throws the entire deck off. Another good example is arrow to pump ratio in Ranger. It's a very, very important one that you have to work with. I do not have one for those situations, but maybe down the road, who knows? Possible. For now, I will just have to, you'll have to settle for me telling you exactly how many blues you need in your deck. Okay, so that is kind of I took a much quicker, condensed approach. I'm just trying something new. I know I don't have the visual, PowerPoints and stuff like that. I wanted to do that for this. I just didn't have the time, because the tool just absorbed me. I was like, this is the coolest shit ever. And I think it's time to get into it. So let's go ahead and talk about the tool that I ended up creating. I think it's time. I think it's time. Let's go ahead and get into it. Okay. Once again, for those of you who didn't were not with me at the beginning of the stream, essentially the backstory of this tool, or this calculator, is I had a situation where I was using a hypergeometric calculator. If you don't know what that is, I think February actually has one built into the stats page. It's very simple. It takes your deck size, how many copies of X card you have in your deck, how many cards you draw, and how many you want, and it gives you like your percentage chance to draw that. But let's use blue as an example, right? So let's say that we have 20 blues and our desire is 1, right? So we have an 85% chance to draw at least 1 blue. Is that good enough? Should it be 87? Should we go up to 23 and go up to 89? Who knows, right? There has to be because that just tells you a percentage chance. That doesn't tell you that it's the right percentage chance. And so I dug into that and it really bothered me when I thought about it. I was like, that is kind of shit. It is something that card game players literally, it's like the equivalent to some religious text. But like, at the same time, it requires so much just knowledge surrounding that number to actually understand if that's the correct number or not, right? And I would beg to differ that a lot of good players also misevaluate this number as well on whether 89 is too conservative, too greedy, perfect, who knows. So I wanted to solve that problem. And so that's where I set out to make this flashbang warning. I do apologize in advance. I made this on Google Sheets. As much as I hate it, I'm an Excel lover. I mean, I just love Excel. But I wanted to make sure that everybody could actually utilize this sheet. And I know some people don't have like access to Excel because you have to pay for it. So most people have it from work and stuff like that, but some people don't. And I wanted to make sure everybody had access to it. So unfortunately, it's not prettied up. The graph is like so basic and shit like that, but like the math is there, and that's the important part. I'll probably make an Excel version because this bothers the shit out of me how like just thrown together this is. But I promise you, this shit is on point. All right, let's break it down. Let's break it down. Okay, so up here at the top left, I'm gonna briefly go over each section, and then we're gonna like we're gonna briefly go over each section. Then we're gonna actually like go into what each thing is, and then we're going to literally right now, because right now I'm just showing you math. I have to prove to you that it works, right? So what we're gonna do is I just picked, I think three or four random deck list, and we're going to literally plug in all the values and see what happens and see if it predicts the correct number of blues. And we're gonna take like tried and true deck list, right? Stuff that we know is good, stuff that we know is that works. And so this is it. And once again, if you want this tool, I'm going to post it in the TheCardGuyz Discord after the stream is where it will be located. But however, there's some nuances on like values you can't go over, under. There's a lot of things that you have to do a certain way. So I highly recommend you watch this part to explain every single piece. And it's not perfect in the sense to where you just get to blindly put in numbers that you don't understand and come up with a result, right? You have to actually give it a little bit of thought. But I broke it down as much as I possibly could. I'm still going to innovate on it a little bit to make it even better. Okay, so at the top left, we have the standard inputs of a hypergeometric calculator. We have the sample size, which is the hand size. Then we have cards and deck, which is self-explanatory. It's how many them things in your pile. And then we got value lost on no blue. And basically what this number is going to represent and how you will acquire this number is you will take your deck and you can go to the Fabry draw 4 part that they have in the deck creation thing. And just keep drawing hands. And you come up with an average value for when you have the number of blues you want, and then you come up with a value of when you don't have the blue that you want, and you come up with an average amount of value that you lose. Simple as that. And once you come up with that number, you put it here. So if on average your hands got 14 value, however you usually get your value, but when you draw all red cards, you get 6 value. This number would be 8. It would be 14 minus 6, and the number is 8, right? Now, then we have a tempo multiplier, okay? And what this is very simple. You technically have more than, but I mean, you can basically do 0.5 or 1. And basically the difference is like, are you going to have ample opportunity to use your cards defensively? And basically what this is doing is it's adding weight to the average block value of your blue cards. Why is that important? Well, let's say the average block value of a warrior deck in the blue slot is 3. But you never get the opportunity to block with it because somebody's trying to fatigue you. You get less value from blocking with your blues, so that should be way less. Makes sense, right? Also, one thing that I want to mention is you should do these calculations for every matchup. It's not a do this calculation one time, enter your blues. It is for every type of matchup you have. So in the aggro setup, you do this math. And then in somebody trying to fatigue you, you do this math to cover a range of how many blues you should have access to in your deck. And then you sideboard accordingly. Okay. Now, so like I said, 1, you have plenty of opportunity to block. And then 0.5, you have some opportunity to block. AKA there is tempo being exchanged. And then very, very simple, Fabry almost does the math for you. However, you only want to take the average block of your blue cards. That's it. Just the blue cards. I'll explain why. The reason that you're only taking the block value of your blue cards is because you want to be playing your red cards. That is our goal. We want to draw enough blues to play our reds. And we're trying to calculate our final result that we actually get from this. This is basically value lost. And so we were actually trying to accumulate the lowest number possible, and that is our answer, right? So in this example here, giving the least amount of loss occurs at 20 blues. So we go here at 20, it's 1643, and then on both sides it's 1646 and 1648. So we have the least amount of loss in value at 20 blues, and that's how we get our answer. And really the innovation aspect of this tool is derived from these two numbers. Okay. Recovery rate from blues and recovery rate from red. And the idea behind these two numbers is it required a lot of brainstorming, but we got there, right? Because I think there's an Excel sheet from Magic that says if you run this list, you run this many lands. And it's not really a guess. Like they've like perfected it kind of. And I'm kind of trying to accomplish the same thing. There's too many variables in Flesh and Blood. It'll never be a de facto like this is it. But we can at least get better than a random hypergeometric calculator. And so I'm trying to bridge that gap with this is what I'm trying to accomplish. And so I had to come up with recovery rate for blue cards and red cards. And essentially just come up with the idea of certain variables allow you to extract from both ends if things go wrong. Draw too many red cards. How much value can we extract? Do you have an example to go through? I am going to go through 4 different decks. I'm going to plug in every single thing. I'm going to make sure you know exactly what you're doing. I'm not going to leave you hanging. If you watch this, you will know how to use this tool. I promise you. I promise you. I'm going to get you taken care of. Okay. So this is just a concept. These are how we get these numbers, okay? For the red cards, we have Tunic Recovery. It's a very simple concept. If you have a Tunic counter, it gives you the ability to kind of cheat on your resources a little bit. It makes the all-red hand not hurt as bad. We applied a weight to that in the formula. And once again, with this, you can also change the weights. If you disagree with me, you can change the weights. All of it is connecting. You don't have to like if I change this to 0.1, the math changes, right? Or I go point 0.6, well, it's going over 1. So, um, but it's all looking at it. It's all smart. Um, Unlike me. I'm just kidding. Then we have the average red cost. So tunics, that's simple, right? If you have tunic, this value is going to be 1. If you don't have value or tunic value, it's going to go to um, tunic is 1, that is 0. Okay. And then we have the average red cost. Okay. So what you're going to do is you're going to add up all the red cards in your deck, add up the cost of all of them, and then divide by how many red cards there are. And you're going to get a number, right? So the average cost to play a red card in your deck is going to be 0.42, or in this example. Typically, the values are going to be from 0 to 6, because it'd be very difficult to have an average value above 6. To give you an example, for Bravo, the average value typically floats around 4. So getting to 6 is crazy business. And then something that's a little bit more difficult, but I tried to kind of give examples on where everything's going to land, is how much action point availability. And the idea behind this weighted variable is if you draw a bunch of red cards, you get punished less if you have the action points to play them. Simple as that, right? And we had to apply a mathematical weight to it, and we had to create a scale to scale with it. And so basically, I created where 0 is kind of like guardian, right? Where it's one thing and you're done kind of situation. You know, few go again options. A good example of this would be maybe a guardian deck that's like giga tailored for go again, like Outmuscle, Zealous, Rouse, and like just Yellow Zealous, E-Strike. Like they have a few go again options in a deck that normally doesn't have a lot of go again. And then a 2 would be like an aggressive Rune Blade, maybe Aurora, or it would be Aurora or Briar or something like that, right? And then 3 is Ninja, where you just action points are not a finite resource, right? You're usually not limited by them. It would be 3. And then the combination of these weights are going to come up with a recovery rate for red cards and give you a percentage that will factor into the formula, giving you the amount of value you can salvage from red cards. Then we're going to go to blue cards. And surprisingly, we're not going to take the same values. We don't care about the same. Tunic recovery does not apply to blues. It doesn't help us any. It just doesn't apply. And action point availability not applicable. And yeah, so we have a couple variables where it's applied average blue block value. Now, if you remember, we already did our average blue block value. So why does this say applied? And basically all this box, you will never change. It says, I fucked that up. You can't hear the box. So basically all this is doing is taking this number and multiplying it by the tempo multiplier, right? So if we change this to a 0.5, it's going to automatically update this to a 1.43. Okay. And here's the thought process, right? We're just using this example. I just have a bunch of random numbers in there that don't matter. If you don't have the ability to block with your blues in a deck where you can salvage a lot of value from your blues, like 2.86 average block on your blues, you need to run less of them in a matchup where you don't have as many opportunities to block. So that's the theory basis behind this number jumping from 8 to 20 is the idea. Okay, and once again, that's going to be matchup dependent, not just deck dependent. Okay. All right. Average blue offensive value. This was going to be a little difficult, but not really, right? But what you're going to do is you're just going to come up with an average offensive value, right? If you're warrior and you run a bunch of blue Iron Song responses and uh, that precision blade or whatever the one with Pierce is. Warrior blues typically get one value. Unless you're Glint, they get one value. It just is what it is. And like blue out for blood, you're getting about one value. It just is. Pitch outlet, good example of that, like I have listed right here, is Brage Forged Bracers, Grasp, Weapons with Go Again, just anything that you constantly can kind of pitch into. It adds a little bit of weight to the formula and basically incentivizes you to run a little bit more blues because you have ways to compensate the value if you do draw too many. Over curve outlets. What this is if you have anything in the deck that effective, every deck has, like we mentioned in our deck building thing, a curve. A curve that operates on one blue, two blues, whatever the case may be. But there are some cards like Pummel, it could be heavy attack reactions in Warrior. Overpower is a good example, something like that, where it really just allows you to, if you draw that extra blue, you oftentimes have a way to dump something into it, right? That's not on the board. This is referring to cards in deck. This is something more on the board, right? Is kind of the idea here. So if your deck has Pummel, you have the ability to efficiently go over the natural curve of your deck. That's the key word, is efficiently. Just because you can doesn't mean it's a good idea and doesn't mean you should add weight to it. So if you put all those numbers in, what it does is it calculates the amount of value you lost by running X number of blues. Then it takes the lowest number. This is just a box that's going to index this table and find the lowest number. So you don't have to look through, okay, that's a smaller number, that's small. It just does it right here. So as soon as the numbers change, boom, 20 is the answer. How does it take into account cards like Sink Below and Crown of Providence? Okay. So what you can do with filtering, and that's one of the things that I haven't built in yet because I'm trying to come up with a way of and it's actually very difficult, right? Because you might come to the conclusion that Sink Below, you always get a filter, but how many times have you drawn a Sink Below and you didn't actually get to use it, right? Or like there are those occasions, right? Or you don't know, it's very risky to use it. There's a lot of those situations where you have an okay hand, but it can get a lot worse, but it could get a lot better. So it's very hard to evaluate that filter potential. Crown of Providence is a little bit of a different story, and basically, I think the closest you could get. The problem is if you factor in the math of Crown of Providence, you're forcing your mathematical calculation to say you are using Crown of Providence to find a blue. Therefore, when you get CNC'd and you use Crown to two-step the CNC, now your deck is not at the appropriate ratio for blue cards because you did not use it for that purpose. Does that make sense? I hope it does. So I think factoring in things like that, that's this math. I went deep. I'm telling you, we went deep, and you're about to see when we plug all this stuff in. Yeah, it goes deep. It goes deep. Okay. So here we go. As I promised, we are going to walk through 4 different decks, showing you exactly how to utilize this tool so you can use it. And what we're going to do is we're going to start as an amazing proof of concept. I have teammate Josh, his Dawnblade Dory. And why did I pick this list? I said, well, Josh is, I think most would agree, the authority in Dawnblade Dory, right? So if anybody has figured out the appropriate amount of blue cards in a Dawnblade Dory deck, I think it's Josh Lau. My opinion. Maybe somebody's just, spent too much time at the library figuring this shit out, but I think he's up there. I think he's up there, to say the least. And so what I want to do is I want to take his list that he literally played, he built, he vouches for, and I want to plug all the values in. And if we come up to at or close what Josh thinks is correct, then maybe we're on to something. And if we're way off, this is going to be very embarrassing. Stay tuned. Okay. All right. So we're going to start with Josh's list. Okay. So what's the first number that we need? We're going to say 60 cards. Doesn't really matter. We're going to say that the tempo multiplier is 1 because warriors operate very often on trading. They're never like always full gas or always, they kind of, especially Dawnblade, Decimator Axe and stuff like that. That's a different story. So tempo multiplier, we're going to leave it at 1. Average block value of blue cards. All right, let's go look. So let's pull up his list and we go to the blue cards. We have a 3 block, 3 block, 3 block, 3 block, 3 block, 3 block, 3, 3, 3. All of the blues are 3. Okay? Simple as that. And then from that point on, what we do, and here's the beautiful thing about this, the math, right? Is you have the ability, assuming that you maintain the ratio, right? Because this says 49 cards. You might say, oh, well, Nathan, you're supposed to do 60. Well, as long as you maintain an equivalent ratio, right? You're not throwing in a bunch of crazy stuff. It's the same. It's the same as long as you do the math. But this is very easy math where every card fucking blocks 3 that is blue. That's simple. That means the average block value of your blue cards, guess what? It's fucking 3. So we're going to come here and we're going to type in 3. That easy. Okay? So this stuff stays the same 90% of the time. We decided that warrior engages in tempo exchanges, so we're going to leave a value of 1. And then we are going to assign an average blue block value of 3. We're halfway done. Okay, so now we're going to go to red. Okay. At first, what we're going to do is we're going to leave the tunic recovery off. We're going to say, because I think he does have a tunic in the list, but maybe he doesn't want to run it. So we're going to try it like with and without, see what happens, right? And so now we need to come up with an average red cost. Okay, so what is the average cost to play out his red cards is what we're attempting to do. Okay, so let's do it. So I have a calculator on my other screen that you can't see, but all we're doing is I'm going to show you how to do this. We skip anything that says 0. Okay, so we have 3 ones here. So we say 3 plus 3 plus 2 and then plus 3 plus 2 0. These are plus 1, and we're going to count the I guess the yellows don't really matter. They're kind of in between. We're going to say plus 3. Okay, gives us a total value of 16. Okay. You'd have to spend 16 resources to play every red card. And now we divide that number by the number of red cards. So we have 3, 3, that's 9, 10, 11, 14, 17, 19, 22, 24. Could have just looked up here, but just confirming, divided by 24. So 16 divided by 24 gives us a value of 0.666666. Okay, so what we're going to do is come in here. We're going to go 0.6666. Okay, that is the average cost of our red cards. Okay, and as far as action point availability, this is kind of up for interpretation. I think Dawnblade probably lands at a 1 or a 2. The reason that I'm kind of hesitant to go toward 2 is your go again is dependent, right? But then again, I guess you have to go 2 because the idea there is playing the red card does not depend on the go again. It's just swinging a second time. So you can leverage all the value from your red cards by just, doing that. So we're gonna put 2, see what happens. Okay, now we need to come up with this is already done for us. It just took this number, multiplied it by this. 3 times 1 is 3. So we just leave that. Average blue offensive value. Okay, so here we need to go to the deck and see how shit these blues are. Okay. This is like one value with a possible go again, but I don't even give weight to the go again because how many times are you getting go again when you're playing Blue Warriors Valor? You know what I'm saying? This is getting one. Go again's worth 1. This is literally 1. This, you have to play 2 cards to do it. Like your average blue offensive value is floating around the ballpark of 1. Maybe it's 1.2, maybe it's 0.8. We're just going to use 1 because we're just doing this on the fly. But I would basically, if this was a deck I was seriously thinking about playing, I would spend a little bit more time to critically analyze the value of these blue cards. And so what we have here, what we're going to do is put in an average value of 1. Okay. And so now what we want to do sorry. Actually, now that I think about it, I'm going back to the action point availability. And I think it's a 1 because the reason I say that is my thought process on you get to play the red, but you don't get the value from the actual value from the red cards unless you swing again. Is kind of the problem. So maybe it's probably a 1, to be honest. And then here we have so these last 2 options here are pitch outlet and the overcurve, right? Which is going to give you, I'm sorry. We also missed a number. That's what I fucked up. So value lost on no blue. I should have done that way earlier because that's actually the most important number and I fucked it up. The average value lost on, if you draw 4 reds in Dawnblade Dory, it's ass cheeks, right? It's like swing Dawnblade and playing out for blood levels of bad. So you can lose easily 6, even more if you have like a counter and you're like, you can't maintain it. You can get bailed out by some zeros, but like there's not a lot here. So it's extremely punishing to not draw those blue cards. So I'm gonna up this from 4 to 6 is what we're gonna do. And then what we need to do is go here to pitch outlet and overcurve outlets. Okay. Now you obviously have what is it? You have the Iron Song Versus, which is an outlet, right? It's not huge, right? Because you're getting 1 value from it. It's not amazing. So in this value, I would probably put the values here are from 0 and 1. Don't go any higher than that. The max is 1. The max would be something like really good go again weapons like Kadachi's or like Aurora's hero ability, something like that level. Whereas Grasp and Braidforged Bracers probably put it at like 0.5, something like that. Okay. And then overcurve outlets. Okay. We basically go to, then we go to how many overcurve outlets does he actually have? And there's actually not that many. Like you have the blue overpowers and you have some of the reds that you can kind of stack onto. But you very quickly just run out of cards. And so I'm going to once again do the same thing and give a value of kind of 0.5 to where like, I don't know, you can do it obviously because the the attack reactions do scale that way, but they're not very expensive ones that really allow you to. The point that I'm trying to make is like Dory doesn't want to be putting 2 blues in the pitch zone a lot. She can, but it's not something that's very common. So I'm gonna put it at like a 0.5 as well. Okay. And this gives us our final values on recovery rate. So basically, what the formula is saying is we're able to recover 76% of the value if we draw extra blues, and we're able to basically recover 73% of our reds. And that basically factors into a bunch of math and gives us a value of the perfect number of blues is 23. We go to Josh's list. He has 23 blues. We have 23 blues in Josh Lau's Dom Blade Dory deck, which means it's right. Okay. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, bro, Nathan like looked at this list, tailored the formula to spit out the exact answer. And I don't doubt you for coming to that conclusion. So what we're going to do, we're going to do 3 more decks the exact same way. But guess what? They're going to be vastly different. We're going to do Aurora that doesn't want any blues. We're going to do, which is like the opposite end of the scale. And we're going to take Bravo, right? And Bravo's like the other end of the scale. And can the tool hold up in the middle? The most aggressive versus a Bravo situation. And then we're going to do one more to really just grab an outlier, and that is MST, right? We're going to take Zen and do the same thing. Zen's kind of an exception. I'm going to tell you how I approached it and kind of explain it from there. It's actually, once you actually think about it, I think it's a lot easier than you think. And we're going to see if it holds up. I don't know. We'll see. We're going to see. The amount of tabs that are open on your browser right now is giving me anxiety. I apologize for that, but I have to have everything lined up for the stream. So I had like, okay, let's go through the wins. We're going to move down. We're going to mention the banned and restricted. And then we're going to talk about these decks during the thing. And then now we're going through the decks. Okay. So I just ripped some decks. So now we're going to do Bravo, right? Where Bravo is, Bravo is in this specific list is kind of, I think this is the Michael Hamilton one that he took to Worlds Barcelona, if I'm not mistaken. And this is kind of where Tunic Bravo really took off. Also, we can go back to the calculator and we can say, okay, can I drop my blues if I add Tunic? Well, you can cut 4 blues and still mathematically operate within the threshold if you run Tunic. Now, you could be running Tunic for other reasons, right? That is entirely possible, but it is what it is. So let's see if it holds up for another example. Let's use something that is really heavy on the blues, right? So we are going to go with the Bravo deck list that kind of really made the whole Tunic Bravo idea kind of really take off. And we're going to do the same math. We're going to do the exact same thing. Okay. We're going to start. And we're going to say sample size 4. He obviously has 4 intellect. We got how many of them things in your pile? 60. Okay. We're going to actually not skip this part. Value lost on no blues. And that is Bravo. I mean, we're talking about Bravo here, right? So Bravo is basically going to, and one thing that I know somebody's going to mention is here I have the average red cost, but I don't have the average red cost here. And that's basically what this number is. The higher cost your red cards, the more you get punished by drawing all reds, right? And so Bravo also is going to lose about 6 value if he draws all reds, right? A lot of times he's going to have the opportunity to block with one of them, pitch 2 to play a CNC or something along those lines. So he's on average between a full a full hand. Um, he's going to lose about 6 value, give or take. Okay. And then tempo multiplier, same way. Especially Tunic Bravo. He's typically pretty aggressive, but he doesn't mind giving a card or two here to like Tunic Pommel, things like that. So he has the opportunity to block. Because if you don't block, then he's just going to fatigue you and beat the shit out of you by dominating, right? And we have to now come up with the average blue block value. Now, because of, I think this list should have Rouse, it does. It's going to, now be careful. Careful here. Unmovable does not have an average block value of 5. This is a 2-card investment, so the average value here is 2.5. You take how many cards it takes to play it, divide it by that many, and that's your answer. So this is worth 2.5. So if we look, we're at about an even split between reds, yellows versus blues. We have one set of 2 blocks here in the form of, well, 2, I guess, because we're favored here. So let's just look at stats. We have 2.88, which is about what the blue's going to be. I mean, everything blocks 3 except for these 2, right? And then in the red slot, there's the same situation where you have 2 that are less than 3. So it's going to be about 288. I don't feel like doing all the math, but it's going to be like 288, okay? In the ballpark, sure. So we're going to go here. We're going to type in 2.88. That's going to change this value right here. Auto update that one. And then Tunic Recovery. This is Tunic Bravo. The whole deck is built around Tunic, so we are going to play that. Or we're going to plug that in. Now, what is the average cost of the reds? Now, this is very important, right? And we do need to, unfortunately, do the math behind this one because, yeah, it is what it is. So, but what we are going to do is we are going to edit and remove. And when I say red cards, it's cards that you're actively wanting to play, right? That's a very key. So sometimes decks will have blue cards that you really want to play, right? Because they're kind of like reds. I'm thinking Surgical Extraction, Rouse the Ancients, things like that are really red cards. They just happen to be blue. So in my opinion, you should count those in your average value calculation, or average cost of red cards. So just because it says red, use a little bit of interpretation on like what are the cards I want to play. Like act like very key to my game plan. So what we're going to do here to make this a little bit quicker is we're actually just going to remove everything that we're like actively just not trying to cast. Like it's cool if Thunderquake, like it's cool if it happens. I feel the same thing about Terra Sunder, where we're not like actively just like breathing heavy when we draw it, but like if it comes up, like cool, we'll do it kind of situation. So most of these blues are going to come out, but the rest we kind of want to play these cards, right? These are the reasons we're playing this deck, right? We want to play these cards. And there's 30 of them, and we're just going to go here, and we're going to say, okay, the average cost of these cards is 3.77. So we're going to come here, and we're going to go to average red cost, but remember, red just means cards you want to play, 3.77, okay? All right, so action point availability. Now, I'm going to put 0, but it could be 1. Because we do have some go again options. I just don't know if it's enough. Because we do have, where is it? We have E-Strike, we have Zealous, we have Rouse. I just don't know if that's enough. I don't know. So we're gonna try with 0. and it might actually make more sense to do one. So now this is already calculated. Now we're going to do the average blue offensive value for Bravo, and I think that that value is going to come out to probably around 2. Anytime you're actively, and once again, blue just means cards you actively don't want to cast. And if we go to that, we see cards like Buckling Blow, Debilitate. To say like these are like 3-card investments for 7, which is like 2.2. This is literally 2. This is less than 2. This goes up a little bit higher to like 8 divided by 3 is going to be like 2.6, if I'm not mistaken. So like it's probably around 2. Probably around 2. But could be upwards of like 2.2. So once again, we might have to change this. So we're going to start with 2, just as a threshold. In fact, yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll go 2. And pitch outlet, we do have some pitch outlet. Like obviously there's the hero ability. The tough part about that is the reason that I don't want to give that a 1 is the idea behind you don't activate the Bravo ability because you drew too many blues. You activate it because you made sense. And I can't think of too many lines where you're like, oh, I drew an extra blue. Now I get to do that. No, it's like, oh, I just have the resources, or they don't have armor, so now's the opportunity to do it. I don't view it as a perfect resource dump. Whereas like Aurora's hero ability, Embodiment of Lightning is always good, right? Like it always is going to provide an ample amount of value. So I'm a put 0.5 here, whereas that could be wrong. But I'll make up for it by putting, say, a 1 here in regards to running Pummel, right? And things like that. And you also have overcurve outlets in the form of E-Strike, allows you to operate a little bit above the natural curve of the deck because it just allows you to play more cards. And you have Pummel, and you have Zealous, and you have Rouse. So I think that deserves probably a 1. So we have an answer of 35 blue cards. That is our final result. If we go back to the deck and rebuild, yeah, we have to go to the edit and put all the cards back in it. That were actually there. No room, don't care. We are at 33 blues. So within 2, right? And that could also just be a factor of me being a little bit greedy here and not giving the respect on go again. If we change it there, I'm curious what happens. Actually didn't change it at all. I guess the numbers were that tight. So it actually didn't really matter there. So yeah, it gave us the answer of 35, which is within the ballpark of what this deck should be doing. Definitely within 2. And that's also to say there are extra blues in the sideboard. So maybe I don't know Hamilton's sideboarding plan, whether those came in as blue cards or whether I don't know. But in total, this deck ran 36. So from 33 to 36, landing on 35. Okay. The formula is working. The formula is doing what it is actively trying to do. In Josh's deck, we hit it right on the nail. And in the Bravo deck, it landed within the threshold that was in the deck. So if we can come to the conclusion that Michael Hamilton is good at building decks, we can say that, okay, the formula is holding up. It hasn't been disproven yet. But one thing that I want to do next is I want to go to the complete opposite end of the equation. I want to do Aurora. And what we're going to do is we're going to type in these numbers, and something interesting is probably going to happen. And it's all because of this number right here. As soon as we change this number to what I think, if the math is right, it should just take a shit. And I'm going to explain why. And it's actually telling you the correct answer if you look at it and analyze it. Okay, so we're going to start from the top. For Aurora, 60 cards in deck, average value lost on no blue card in hand. Think about Aurora for a second. If you don't draw a blue card, do you lose any value? No. The answer is no. So what do? We change that number to 0. We don't lose any value if we draw a blue card. And then watch the perfect number of blues down here at the bottom. Watch what happens. It goes directly to 4. And the reason that goes to 4 here is I haven't figured out. I mean, I know how. The reason this is not a problem in Excel, it's a problem in Google Sheets, where you can. I have 4 parameters on different situations where if you draw 1 blue, 2 blues, 3 blues, 4 blues, and you can't have a result less than that. So these are coming up with errors. But what this number is actually doing, it is going to 0. So if this was in Excel and the formulas worked perfect, the answer here would be 0. And I appreciate it. Thanks for stopping by. The correct answer is 0. And if we approach Aurora, we can quickly just not do the rest of it. I mean, we can if you want. It's not going to change the value. The value will be 0 because of this. And here's the thought process behind the math. If you don't lose value by not drawing a blue, why would you run a blue? You wouldn't. You would just run a deck full of red cards. Holy shit. It's almost like that's how Aurora is built. So the equation quickly turns to run a blue card, it has to be better than your worst red card. And that is where we land with Aurora. We put cards in like, as I say, put cards in immediately as I remove it. Unfortunate click there. So this card is probably better than the next red card you would put in, right? And same for this one, right? They're lightning. They hit a bunch of thresholds. They're 3 blocks. These are better than 50, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60 red cards, right? Or yellow, whatever the case may be. So the question is not how many blues do I run, it's do I have 60 good red cards? And if the answer is no, you start putting in blues. It's literally that simple. So by definition, that is what the formula is telling you to do. The formula is telling you, dumbass, don't run blue cards. Because this, like I said, if this was in Excel and Google Sheets didn't suck, this would be 0, is what it would say. So it checked out. Let's recap real quick. We did Josh's Dory deck right on 23. Exactly what he had. Bravo. Hamilton had 33 to 36 blues, 36 total, and it landed on 35. Right there in the threshold. And then we did this one, and it told me exactly what I should do in building that type of Aurora deck. Obviously, if you start incorporating more 2 costs and stuff like that, then these numbers change. But in a Cheerio Aurora deck, The reason you run blue cards is there's not a better red card. You're not running it for the blue card. Okay? That is the solution. Okay. With that being said, let's try to disprove it one more time. Okay? And we are going to use Zen, which on the surface, and we're just going to use the battle hardened list that I used, which is, I believe, Nick Butcher's list that he won the calling in. So it's tried and true list, pretty standard stuff, nothing crazy. There's a very interesting aspect that we have to distinguish, and the answer to that is, what do we do with the fucking transcend cards? And I think I came up with a very elegant solution. And it's that they're red cards, because that's what they do in Zen. They go get red cards. I think it's pretty simple. That's what they tend to accomplish. So in this calculation, what we're going to do, and you're going to end up having to do this with MST heroes specifically because their blues are so good. What you're going to do is this formula, if I'm not mistaken, should basically calculate how many other blue cards we need if we count the transcend cards as red, is what we're trying to accomplish. So what we're going to do is we're going to do us a nice little count, right? We're once again, we're going to go ahead and start with, let's go and go to the sheet. Cards in deck 60, obviously. Cards in deck 60, and then value lost on no blue. Now Zen's interesting. It's not going to be as severe as, because a lot of the stuff is 0 cost, right? But there are a lot of 1 cost, right? Where let me delete this so I can just go right next to each other. There's a lot of 0 cost, but at the same time, there's like CNCs and Breed Angers, Chase the Tail, Maul and Key, things like that, right? That get pretty. And then if you don't have a blue, you can't transcend. So if you don't draw a blue, you can't really play these ones. So it could be a little punishing. So I think, I don't know, a value of 4, probably. Somewhere in between, Aurora not drawing a blue versus the Warriors in Bravo kind of situation. And also, he really wants a blue because he can swing weapon, right? That too. He has a very good outlet to take advantage of that. Obviously, the Zen that we know today is very okay with being able to block with cards. It's very mid-rangey deck, so we're going to keep a 1 there. And then we need average blue block value. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to do the math, unfortunately. In fact, what we're going to do is the other way worked so good. What we're going to do is we're going to remove all the red cards. We need to come up. And now remember, right before we got in here, I said that I was going to count the transcend cards as red because they are. So we're going to also remove those. We're going to use a little bit of critical thinking and determine that is what we need. And that's the difficult part about the sheet. It's not a dummy sheet where it just plugs in whatever and you're going to get your answer. You have to put some thought into it. But that's why I'm doing this whole review of it and kind of show you. So here we have the average defensive value of 2.86 is our value. So we're going to go, it's actually close to Bravo. Damn, 2.86. Okay. We do not run Tunic. Changing that to 0. I know some people are going to say, but you have Kasaya. And once again, this is the red section, and we're trying to calculate how much Tunic makes up for that. If you're getting value from Kasaya, you already had blues, so there's no point in doing the math to determine how much value you lost by not drawing a blue. That doesn't make sense. It's the same reason we didn't factor in grains. Was if you are flooded, there's no point in adding that to the calculation. Doesn't make any sense. Average red cost. So now what we're going to do is do the same thing in reverse. We're going to go to edit and we're going to add all of these. Do, 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 do. We did not add weakest link. Sideboard card. We add these to give us 60 card deck. Okay. And then now we're trying to calculate the average red cost. So what we want to do is take out the actual blues, not the transcends, because they are red. LSS just didn't paint them correctly. Means you're winning, no math needed. I mean, that's based. That's extremely based. Okay, so now we need the average cost. Is what we're looking for. So we're going to go to stats. Average cost is 0.46. Okay, so we're going to go here as 0.46. Action point availability. We literally have something labeled as ninja, so we're going to change that immediately to a 3. And then we're going to go here, and we have this already calculated. Now we have to come up with an average. Let's do over curve outlets. The weapon. The weapon is you have a very average cost that's very close to 0, and your weapon is your outlet, right? So I mentioned things like weapons with go again that are consistent, and things that you can play naturally above curve. You can utilize those blues to transcend, which generates red cards. So we're going to change both of these to a 1 because he definitely qualifies for sure. No questions asked. Okay, so the last number that we need is average blue offensive value. Once again, we're only talking about the non-red cards. So it'd be cards like Harmony, Harmony of the Hunt, Levels of Enlightenment, Pouncing Key, which is a little bit on the weaker side. Same for Wind Chakra, Key Unleashed, and Tiger Form Incantation. So the baseline for all these blues seem to be around 2, give or take. But obviously a little bit higher because of levels, right? Like on average, this is getting 2. This is getting about 2. 2. It has obviously a higher ceiling, but could literally give you 0. And then this is 2, 1 for this, 1 for the tiger. Also a little bit higher Shuko reasons and things like that. And then levels is obviously just really good. So probably, I don't know, 2.2, 2.3 on average value for blue card. So 2.2. We'll try that. Okay. And yeah, let me make sure that we got everything. We have the block value, everything, and we came up with 21 blue cards. Now remember, when I went over Zen, I said that we were counting the transcend cards as reds because they're that strong. And we're trying, what the formula should do is calculate the amount of other blues that we need. And it came up with the number of 21. So let's see what we got. If we add all the blue cards, we get a value of, not all the value. I mean, we're not going to add like wax on and that shit, but like the blues that we know are in the main board, we're going to add those. Make sure we got missed one. 60 card deck. We do. We're going to count the number of transcend cards, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We're going to subtract 9 from the total blue count up here. 30. 30 minus 9, 21. 20 fucking 1. So chat, I don't know how else to spell it other than I think I got something. We literally just did, I'll recap one more time. We did 4 different decks that are all across the board, all different types. We did Aurora. It told us exactly what we wanted to know. We did Josh's Dawnblade Dory deck. The pioneer of Dawnblade Dory. And my formula landed on the exact same number as Josh. We then said that's too nice, that's too good to be true. We took a Bravo deck that runs a fuck ton of blues. And it landed in the exact same threshold as Michael Hamilton's Tunic Bravo list that he took to Worlds. We tested the formula at all angles, and it got every, even MST, where the outliers, oh, the blues do something else, so we have to come up with a note. It literally got it exactly right. To a Worlds list, a calling winning list, to an expert list. It got every single one of them. We did it, chat. We power crept the hypergeometric calculator. Now, with that being said, there's more work to be done because we have to, somebody already mentioned on Twitter, we have to factor in things like RuneGate. Illusionist is probably going to be a little bit tricky, right? We're going to have to change, adjust the formula a little bit. Or not adjust it, but probably add a variable that takes the place of another one. Because you, in like Prism, as an example, you have to have yellows and blues, right? And you're trying to find the balance there. And so we have to solve that problem. But that is my next step, is to solve those very niche individual problems. But I think if you critically think as you do it and everything is like logically done, if it's not already, I think it's one of the best deck building tools in Flesh and Blood. And what I'm going to do is, after this stream concludes, I'm going to post it in the TheCardGuyz Discord under the live stream deck. I'll probably just throw it in general too, in case people want it. And I made sure to do it in Google Sheets, so you don't have to have access to Excel or anything like that. And I want everybody to have access to the very common problem of being able. 87% wasn't good enough. Knowing that there was an 87% chance to draw that blue card was not good enough for me. I wanted to know how many blue cards I need to run. That's what I needed to know. So I'm going to make sure that this is publicly available to anybody that wants to do it. Also, if you want to experiment, like I mentioned earlier, the weights that are to the left of all the variables for the recovery rate on reds and blues, you can change those. If you don't agree with something that I'm if you don't agree with one of the weights, feel free to increase it, decrease it. Just make sure all the weights in each category add up to one, and you're good. Play around with it, change some stuff. You take it and test some things out. Uh, I'm also looking for feedback. I know it's not perfect. There are going to be situations with decks that I'm not super familiar with that, you know, oh, I tried to, build this Ira deck with 57 blues and it's telling me 48. Like I don't know. Somebody's gonna create something and it's gonna challenge the formula in a certain way. And I'm gonna have to like adjust some things, maybe learn a little bit. But as you're using the tool, if you decide to, give me feedback, comment, say, and hopefully the dream goal is to get it right because I can take it a step further and kind of like, it's a little inconvenient to do all of that, right? I've broken it down a lot to make it very simple, but it could be done even better. And if I can get it really refined, I don't know, Philip, what do you think? Throw it in February, that'd be kind of sick. That'd be kind of sick. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. First thought, is there a way to turn levers to have it accurately analyze Fang? And so thank you for bringing that up because that's a very great example of something that I don't know. That's just something that you're going to have to try. And it may not be an issue with the formula, but the way that you have to interpret the numbers to get the formula to work, as I did with Zen, right? If I just did no critical thinking, I said, "Oh, it's telling me to run 21 blues in a Zen deck. This fucking formula sucks," right? But if you come up with the concept of that the transcend cards are basically reds because they're literally tutoring red cards, then we put the formula in a situation to where it could succeed. So Fang is going to be very similar, where what I estimate is this is what I would do, just off the top of the dome, haven't given any thought. I would do two calculations. I would do before heroes turned on and after, and then try to find a way to logically come to the conclusion saying this is my average time to get turned on and go from there and say, okay, if it takes me 4 turns on average and I need this amount of blues, say the number it spits out is, I don't know, 12, right? And then once you hit, once you become live, then you don't need any blues, right? So your ideal number is 0. Well, if your average game length is 4 or 8 turns, just throwing a number out there, 8 turns, and this number was 12, this number was 0, and it was 4 turns long to turn on your hero ability. Maybe it's as simple as 12 divided by 2, you should be on 6. I don't know. That's just how I would start my thought process. I'd plug in all the numbers. I would say, okay, this looks possible, and then go from there. If it doesn't look possible, then rethink your train of thought. I don't want you to assume the formula always knows more. That's a bad idea, and it can be very dangerous. But you should know enough to where you start noticing that something is very off, because the formula is designed in a way to where once it begins to skew in a certain direction, it goes very hard. Like once you start going toward like 25 to 30, it gets to 34, 35 really quick, which you should in Fab, because really you're jumping from an average cost curve of 3 to 6, or needing 1 blue versus 2 blues, which justifies the jump. But that's just kind of like how my thought process would begin. I'm not saying it's correct. That's just how I would start it. You get caught up in chat, more like the smart guys. I don't know about that. We trying out here with the Alabama education. I'm so where I deposit my money. You keep it in your pocket. This one is free 50 on me. I'm hoping that this is my form of evergreen content. If there's ever a day where I have to stop making content, this is something that can go on for the life of the game. And I wanted to um yeah, I wanted to do that because that's impactful. It helps players and it's what I'm here to do. Simple as that. For the low price of 4.90, no, I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna do that. This man solved fab. Mind blowing. I mean it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work. But like I said at the very beginning of the stream, when I started, I got very, very lucky on the weights out the gate. Normally, this process would take so much longer because I'd have to tweak the formula and say, okay, there's this, there's that. That just seems way off. I need to tailor this a little bit, change this. But bro, when I ran my first numbers, I think the first deck that I ran it against was I don't even remember. It was like a old Briar deck because that's just what I trusted the most. It's what I knew, right? And it landed within like 3 blues, and I was like, "Oh shit!" "Oh shit!" We're kind of onto something. And so, I think it was a combination of a lot of hard effort and getting a little lucky on the initial weights. But there's definitely room for improvement, and that's going to be the goal. I'm not going to promise any timeline on when that's going to be done. This is a side passion project kind of thing I'm not going to promise when the room gate calculation is going to be in there or things like that. It's just going to be as we go kind of situation. But I hope everybody enjoys it. And like I said, I'm going to post it in the Card Guys Discord and the general chat, and then also live stream decks because that's where people usually go to see the decks that we play for the stream. Probably be some good locations to place it. And yeah, if you have any feedback, comments, hey, this broke, this didn't work, anything like that, please reach out, contact me. I would love to, you know, either learn from it and make it better or let you know what you did wrong. I'm happy doing either one. And yeah, I hope everybody enjoys the tool. And more importantly, hope everybody enjoyed the stream. I apologize that I had to and actually do me a favor. If you're still listening, you're the goat. But if if you do get a lot of value from the tool, like share the video. If it brings you value, send this video because I'm telling you, please, please don't send them just the spreadsheet. They're gonna fuck it up. I'm telling you. Send them the video and just tell them skip the first half or they can watch it, whatever. But just tell them the most important part. Watch the end where he explains the sheet. Just tell them to check out that part so they can use it, right? Um, I'm gonna probably blast it on Twitter as well. So no point in trying to keep it a secret to yourself. It's gonna be known. No shenanigans. Are you attending the Battle Harden this weekend? I am not. It's just outside my range for a Battle Harden. If it was a calling, I'd damn sure be there, but not quite for a Battle Harden. I assume you're referring to was it Charlotte? And if that is the case, I think I'll have a couple teammates that are there. I think maybe Aaron and Taylor are going to that. Don't quote me on it, but I think they're going. And yeah, if you see any of us fellow card guys, please stop and say, hey, we all like chit chatting with people that watch the content. But I hope you enjoyed the stream. I hope you got value out of it somehow. If the tool brings you any value whatsoever, please share the video, send it to them so they have a good explanation on how to use it. so we can get the community even better, even better. Just want to say thank you so much for joining me. And then next week, I decided during the stream, I'm going to spill it. I'm going to spill the beans. I have a very unique Aurora deck that is very different than what a lot of people are building. I'm still working on it. It's a work in progress. But the idea is it's pretty intense, and I think you're going to enjoy it. So come see me next weekend for the very, very unique Aurora deck list. And we're going to take it for a spin and see what it can do. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. Have a good night.